Sometimes I get so upset when I hear all kinds of stuff happening around the world, and I wonder how is it going to end, when will reach its peak, so that people will understand that we cannot continue like this anymore, and this is a deliberate degradation of humanity. So today I learned from some blogs on Russian internet that pensioners were put out of the retirement homes in Germany, in Berlin, and another town called Rach, something like that. Hundreds of them, and that building was going to be used for refugees further on. So I don't understand how this can even happen, how you can put the elderly out in the cold, and how refugees are more important than the people themselves who are in this country, who pay taxes and always paid this church tax that allegedly the church owns the building. The church is the landlord of the building, and there was a contract for the lease at least till 2031. I got really upset just hearing this, although these are not our Russian pensioners who also struggle day to day. And I guess such members of society as hookers from Ukraine are the most important. And I'm not against sex work as it is. I just think that they lie a lot about it, and they never pay taxes, and sometimes they just take somebody else's place in university, in job places. So this all things should be legalized, and they should work in the open and not pretend that they are somebody else. And this all should be private. And such things as getting naked in public or getting naked in front of children shouldn't be allowed. Nobody should be allowed to bare their chest to prove their point or something like that. I was also very upset to read on way things are in United States, how pensioners also lost their savings in this year, and how this whole pandemic thing changed things the way they are. So when I got myself involved with an American many years back, which was over 10 years back, I didn't know all the details of the situation that there were there, but I used to express my opinion to him that medicine should be free, that a person shouldn't come to a hospital and think about how much they are going to pay, whether their so-called insurance covers it or not, and people shouldn't be afraid to go to the hospital. And whenever I spoke to him or to any other American about that, they would get really hostile and argumentative, and they think that it's something like communism, or they are made to believe this way, although that's what their taxes should be paying for. And as things progressed, I realized that the way things are in the US nowadays, that mortgage and home ownership is just another scam in the US. And this particularly concerns that comparing to other world, the mortgage rates seem to be very cheap. But at the same time, if you miss mortgage, bank owns your property and they can take it away from you, and you don't own that property if you miss on your payment. And this also shouldn't happen. The second thing that I learned is that the houses are built from the stick frames, where in Russia, for example, they tend to be built from solid logs of wood, or this thing called bricks. So the bricks and the solid wood is what Russians would tend to build their houses from. And as for the frame sticks, it's just usually the barracks for migrant workers who come to live temporarily. And in general, this idea that you shouldn't be living with your parents, and at the same time they encourage this kind of stuff that they show in the Friends series. Like there are people living together in one apartment in New York who are not related, and the actors look like a bunch of ugly degenerates. And the type of relationship that shows like some of them are fuck buddies, friends with benefit type of relationship, and somebody is a lesbian, somebody got this, somebody got that, they were together and they are not together. And then this type of creature, I forgot her surname, who was married to Brad Pitt with a man Joe, is shown like some kind of a beauty in the United States. And when my man got sick, he went through many doctors until they got him into this Lyme disease cult, which is what this ex-wife did to him. And I believe this was done through what is called black magic and hypnosis, where she either gave him some drug systematically to control his mind, or somebody at his work did, or he was hypnotized at these Lyme support meetings, which he went to in New York. And there was this disgusting, repulsive creature, New York Times columnist called Amy Tan, who is just a pathological liar, who claimed that she had Lyme disease, where she was a witch and had this history of schizophrenia in her family, which is just hearing voices, and another type of side effect of magic. And she wore all this symbolic jewelry, which is just like when a person breathes or when they talk with their with this pendant necklace and earrings, they kind of move, and it turns and it brings people into trance. That's what gypsies often do. This is what she done to him, and this whole Lyme cult disease, where they just convinced people to take whole bunch of horse dosages of antibiotics intravenously, doxycycline. And you can imagine that my man used to be very stubborn and strong-willed, and they somehow managed to break his will, and they managed to convince a person to take these huge dosages of intravenous antibiotics, in spite of him being allergic to them. And he went after this antibiotic dosage one after another, and that's how his disgusting, repulsive, infertile ex-wife with her IVF kids finished him. And the fact that she was covered by the police and CIA and FBI, where I complained to her about her to them, it just shows that she was one of them. I don't know who, maybe she belonged to MI6 or MI5 or Canadian Secret Service. In general, she was placed there as his ex-wife in order to surveil and spy on him and report what the officers of Air Force do. Anyways, there was no place for him to have this insurance via army. I guess they couldn't manage this, so he spent all his life savings on these useless Lyme treatments, which his ex-wife convinced him of. And of course, this son that she had the same simultaneously with my son and hooked him up on child support. Of course, he never inherited somehow allergy to antibiotics that my man did. And my son, of course, he inherited it, and he would have been dead if he had been put through huge doses of antibiotics like that child was. And this, to me, just proves all this massive cover-up and that it wasn't his son. And all they forging evidence and things like that with this lab test and DNA and shit like that. So anyways, so I got to read this blog called Some Canadian Man, and I used to have this conversation with my man. I said, so how much was when he was just started on his journey trying to diagnose what was wrong with him, and he was of course poisoned with a nerve agent enough to kill 24 people, just like my son was. And I asked him back then how much is MRI, that maybe he could do the MRI when he's in Moscow, and I asked him how much it was. I said in Moscow in private clinic it is $250 or $500 at that time. And now I read this blog, which was posted on 20th of February. And February for me, it's a very hard month because my man was born on the 1st of February. And I remember I always had these huge arguments and fights with him about this Lyme disease. And he kept blaming me for stuff that I didn't do because of this disgusting infertile ex-wife of his, and this disgusting, repulsive, infertile creature called Amy Tan, who was part of this Lyme cult organization, which is probably also Secret Service or a cult shit, with them looking for their organ donors and whatever they make from dead people's bodies which they need to be cleaned up first with huge doses of antibiotics. As some Indian told me, they have a saying in India, even a dead elephant is useful. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, you can still take his bones for the ivory. You still can take this and that, his meat and stuff like that. So I'm reading this blog, Inconvenient Truth About Medicine in America, Personal Experience and Comparison with Canada. American medicine as in the whole system of healthcare in the United States is a source of disappointment of the country inhabitants for several reasons. One of the main problems is the absence of universal healthcare system, for example, like in Canada or in Russia. And this leads to several difficulties which concern access of normal, simple Americans to the medical care, depending on the factors. This is their income and place of residence. Besides, due to high cost of medical service in the United States, many people can hardly afford the necessary aid, which leads to the delays in their applying for medical care or fully refuse to receive it. Simply said, they prefer not to visit a doctor due to absence of possibility to pay for services and medicine. I personally experienced on myself all the sweet things of American medicines when I lived in the United States. Particularly that moment when local insurance is what I didn't have yet, but I had to ride to the hospitals on an emergency truck vehicle, on the ambulance. The reason I lost consciousness unexpectedly and I wasn't clear about heart and breathing. I was saved from bankruptcy only due to help from the landlady of the apartment which we rented, who found out and went into the hospital in order to save us from the hospital. She told to my wife that if there is nothing serious and I feel okay, then it's better to run away from hospital as soon as possible. Even in spite of the fact that I was prescribed a bunch of useful research and tests a month ahead and advised me to stay about 6 days in the hospital in a local comfortable bed and being fed 3 times a day. Already later I found out that such a complex of services could have cost me about $50,000-$70,000, out of which even having considerably good insurance, I would have had to pay a couple of dozens of thousands out of the pocket, which together with the rent for a year and other expensive would make my move on the working visa to the United States a useless spending adventure. That was cool, right? Finding out that in 2 years, in essence, we remained with the same money with which we arrived to earn more income. But happily, we found a way out, and after several visits to the financial department of a hospital, we agreed to pay a couple of thousand from my pocket, and another part was paid by my insurance, which I bought myself, not from the employer. They also made a discount for us. The selling of this insurance was like at a Eastern bazaar. I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. By the way, in my bill for their emergency to give me a lift to the hospital, we lived in New Jersey, across the Manhattan Bridge, and this ambulance car was driving me for about 20 minutes, not more. They gave me a bill for $4,000, and they immediately did an MRI, and this cost me about $10,000, and CT scan about $3,000, and tests, small tests, and so on. They fed me 2 times in the hospital, which also cost me like in a restaurant with a 5-star Michelin. And he gives this bill that he was presented with, and MRI of the brain was $9,711.30, and electrocardiogram was $323.70. And blood test was $628. Lab chemistry, don't know what it is $1,916. I cannot believe that a ride in an emergency in the ambulance, what can they be that it would cost $9,711? Like, you have to pay for gas, okay? You have to pay for gas when you drive a car. You have to pay for an hour wage of a driver, okay? You have to pay for 2 MDs or less educated specialists in the car who are working with you. Like, how come it costs $9,000 to drive in an emergency vehicle? I don't understand how this is possible. And I have answer to this. They have to have this huge budget for military bases around the world and all these secret service agents. Okay, I will refrain from it. I will read on what he writes. What can I say? American medicine is one of the reasons why we decided not to stay in the United States and to move to Canada from New York to Toronto. Yes, here we have our own cool things and problems and tricks, but we at least do not worry about deaths which American medics make for their patients. Of course, they will save your life while you are in their hospital bed, but you feel comfortable, a lot of equipment and everything is new and beautiful. But once you're out of hospital, you have to work for years to pay the bills. What kind of life is this? If you don't believe me, then watch American movies. Blah, blah, blah. In addition to system problems in medicine, system of insurance, it's very hard to understand by yourself. The plan of medical care can be complicated for understanding and can vary vastly due to the scope of provided services. One difficulty leads to mixing up, as patients do not always know what services are covered and which services they have to pay out of pocket. There are always some text with small script and changes in the conditions, additional fees, and so on. One moment you think that your insurance is covered it all, but no, and it's too late. Your post mailbox has a bill size of your annual salary. So another thing that I wanted to mention was that so much for degradation of family unit in United States is that my man used to say to me like how important a family to him is, and how I should never say anything bad about his family, and how this should be like this whole family unit was sacred to him. But when it came to his illness, all his patriotism, like he served his country and the fucking army couldn't even pay his hospital bill. Fucking pieces of shit, faggots. Just faggots. The only thing they care about is money. If there is no money interest in this for them, they will never help you. That's the immoral value system. And his brother, one of his brother, I think he's some kind of a very, very rich man. So my man told me that he borrowed money from his brother to come and see me and his kid. So he had to borrow money. Why couldn't his older brother, who is an oligarch, who has mansions in LA, who has mansions in London, why couldn't he just pay his fucking brother's bill? Why do you lend it? I don't understand this. It's just fucking embarrassing. I feel so embarrassed for this whole fucking family. And I suspect that his other brother, like he has two brothers, I suspect his other brother fathered that kid. This is just so disgusting. And his mother, his American mother, who he told me is about 80 years old, who he told me is German, she never once bothered about my son. That's her grandson. She never bothered. She never asked, she never inquired about her grandson. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. So they sent, well, I knew I was in trouble when I sent all these letters to the police, to the United States police, to FBI, to CIA, when my man was still alive, when they could still save him, when my son would still had a dad, when he was going crazy, when he couldn't help himself. His family couldn't see that he wasn't right in his head, that he went against his instincts, including the instincts of survival, and that this ex-wife had bad influence on him. They couldn't somehow see that their own member of their own family, that he was going insane, that he was not right in his mind. That's why they should have stepped in and helped him financially, mentally, emotionally supported him. Because I couldn't fight this fight by myself. I just told him, she's lying to you. You don't have any Lyme disease. Like this disgusting, infertile Amy Tan creature. She never had a Lyme disease herself. And she's just infertile. She never had a kid. She doesn't care if your child dies from antibiotics. She doesn't care if you die, because she bought herself a house in LA for all this money she took from Lyme support meetings and selling of doxycycline. So anyways, they sent to me these agents via dating site, via Tinder. And this Turkish agent who just wanted to steal my eggs the first time he saw me, he was talking to me non-stop about some hooker from Crimea of Korean origin, which he met in Moscow. And he was talking to me how this is a problem to him, how she fucked him and she lived with him. He was renting an apartment here, and that she would fuck him. He would pay her right away, and then she would escape for the night and fuck other men. And he was talking about that to me. When I came to the meeting, I was hoping that he would talk about helping my child, about sending my child to Walter Reed Hospital in the United States. That's what I expected he would talk to me about. No, there was other things more important. That is his crane hooker that he had, and his emotional problem. He used me, this Turkish man with disgusting CIA mother from America, who raised him that way, with no empathy, no emotions. I guess that's how they pick people for their CIA and other secret service, that they choose some freaks who watch kiddie porn all day and who just watch people being tortured, and they have no mercy. And by this criteria, they find them and they employ them, they force them to cooperate with them. That's how I see it now. So anyways, this piece of shit, who was ugly as fuck, because that's his inner world reflected on the outer world. They all have some kind of a disgusted noses, like somebody took a huge dump on their nose and they have many humps to them. So he was talking to me that he was into construction business and he won many contracts of construction for the oil field and this hotel next to the Russian parliament building. And that's how these creatures let me know that they control my town, Moscow, the CIA, the MI6, and that our services just let that whole thing happen. And that's how I learned. And he told me that he bought this, his problem was, his psychological problem was the error in his, system error in his brain that he couldn't resolve, was that she forced him to buy her apartment in Moscow, and he did. He bought the hooker the apartment in Moscow, and she left him still. Once she got what she wanted from him, that is an apartment in Moscow, she broke it off with him, and their relationship ended, although he had a wife and a kid back in Turkey. He was talking like he had some claims against her, that she was so promiscuous, this Ukrainian whore. At the same time, him cheating on his wife didn't register in his fucking head. So anyways, I also watched this alternative media in Russia who were like promoting all these conspiracy theories and the channels they have. And I remember they having all this kiddie stuff like teddy bears on the background. These are old men in their 40s and 50s, which looked like Balenciaga ads. And they also had these sponsors which offered real estate to Russians in Turkey. You know, this real estate that they had. They were selling lots of real estate to Russians, knowing that there would be earthquake there, of course. And they were talking about this company which built a building that was supposed to be earthquake proof, called Renaissance or something like that. And they had to talk about this on their channels once the earthquake in Turkey happened, that it was some kind of other Renaissance construction company, not the one that built buildings for Gazprom, because it will expose their connection to CIA and Secret Service and stuff like that. And they had to talk like this is just similar names of the company. This Renaissance in Turkey is not the same Turkish Renaissance construction that built buildings for our Russian gas companies. Anyways, as I realized from all this story was that somehow they have all this budget for all these Secret Service agents which they have around the world. Like, for example, buying an apartment in Moscow would be at least $300,000. So this freak had money somehow from, for buying an apartment for his hooker, for his Ukrainian hooker, $300,000. He had this money. My man didn't have any money. There was no money in the American budget for my man when he got sick. No money at all. And the huge factor in all of this is, of course, their media, the New York Times, and the way they brainwash Americans, telling that it's a sin, it's some kind of a very bad, they destroy your character once you talk about socialized medical care. It's just something that a taboo topic, especially for Republicans, conservatives. Like, they have this belief that their doctors are so fucking brilliant and it costs so much. Like, they stick a band-aid on your head when you fall and they charge you $20 for the band-aid that costs 10 cents. And this whole shit is made up. This whole shit is just to set off the expenses that go to all these agents like Robbie Parker, Sandy Hooker's freak, for their life, for their children, say multiple children life, for their relocation to Switzerland, and stuff like that. no money for medical care in the United States. That's just a taboo topic for them all of them.